My parents held a fake funeral for me when I quit med school, then secretly stole my $35 million inheritance. 8 years later, I walked into their Christmas party wearing an FBI wire and let them confess to everything. My hands trembled violently as I stared at the glowing notification on my phone screen, the blue light casting long shadows inside the cabin of my car. After 8 years of absolute, suffocating silence, my mother had finally reached out. The message read exactly like a rusted knife twisting in a wound I thought had healed. Family Christmas party at 6:30. We have something important to discuss. The timestamp showed she sent it exactly 12 hours after Forbes published their 30 under 30 list featuring my face on the digital cover. 8 years of treating me like a literal corpse, and now, suddenly, they wanted to talk. I had 30 minutes to decide whether to walk back into the house that had once been my childhood home, or continue living as the ghost they had so viciously made me. The irony burned through my chest like battery acid. They had declared me dead when I chose my own dreams over their rigid expectations. But here I was, more alive than ever, sitting in my Tesla outside their pristine, snow-draped suburban mansion in Fairfield County, Connecticut, holding the power to destroy their entire lives. 8 years ago, I was 24 years old and about to commit the ultimate sin in the Vance family. The scene has played out in vivid, agonizing detail in my nightmares ever since. It was a freezing Sunday dinner in December. My father, Dr. Arthur Vance, sat at the head of our massive mahogany dining table like a monarch holding court. His surgical hands were folded precisely, and his icy blue eyes held that familiar, crushing look of disappointment. My mother, Eleanor, positioned herself like a prosecutor preparing for a lethal cross-examination. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it looked painful, and she wore a tailored navy dress that made her look like she was attending a hostile corporate takeover rather than a family meal. My older brother, Julian, lounged in his chair with the arrogant confidence of the golden child. At 27, he was already a junior partner at one of Boston's most ruthless corporate law firms. So, Leo, my father began, slicing his steak with literal surgical precision. How are the studies at Harvard Medical? Your neurology rotation should be starting. My stomach twisted into violent knots. Actually, Dad, I need to tell you something. I've decided to withdraw from the medical program. I'm starting a technology company. The silence that followed was so heavy it felt like the air pressure in the room had dropped. My mother's silver fork clattered loudly against her fine china. Julian looked up from his phone, his eyes gleaming with a predatory amusement I couldn't quite identify at the time. What exactly are you saying? My father's voice was dangerously, terrifyingly calm. I've been developing software that could revolutionize emergency supply chain logistics, I explained, my passion pouring out like water from a broken dam. I talked about artificial intelligence, predictive modeling, and the potential to save thousands of lives by getting disaster relief resources to people faster. I explained my business plan and my prototype. I was so caught up in my desperate pitch that I didn't notice Julian holding his phone at a weird angle, the tiny red recording light blinking in the dim dining room. This is absurd. My mother snapped, her voice like shattered glass. You're throwing away a guaranteed legacy in medicine to chase some foolish fantasy? The Vance name means something in this state. I'm gaining the chance to make a real difference, Mom, I pleaded. My father stood up, his chair scraping violently against the hardwood. The Vance family builds its reputation on medicine and law. We do not chase get-rich-quick tech schemes. If you walk away from Harvard, you walk away from this family. We will not support this foolishness financially or emotionally. End. The conversation rapidly spiraled into a screaming match. I accused them of never listening to what I actually wanted. They accused me of being a delusional, ungrateful failure. Julian sat quietly, recording every heated, out-of-context moment where I sounded disrespectful. Finally, my mother delivered the ultimatum that would define the next decade of my life. You have 1 week to return to Harvard. She spat, her face pale with fury. If you don't, then as far as we're concerned, you are no longer our son. We will tell our circle that Leo Vance died in a car accident, and we will hold a funeral to make it official. I thought it was a sick, dramatic metaphor. I was wrong. 3 days later, when I didn't return to Boston, they followed through. They held an actual, closed-casket funeral service at our local country club's chapel. They invited extended family and colleagues, lying to everyone's face that I had been killed in a tragic pileup. Julian inherited my trust fund, my college savings, and my designated portion of the estate. He also heavily edited the audio he recorded of our fight, removing all their abuse and keeping only the parts where I yelled, playing it for our relatives to prove I was an unhinged monster before my death. I found out when a college buddy saw the obituary and called me, sobbing. When I showed up at my parents' house the next day to confront them, my father opened the door, looked right through me, and said, "You have the wrong address. No one named Leo lives here." Then, he slammed the door in my face. The first few years after that were a living hell. I moved to Denver, Colorado, with 2 suitcases, a laptop, and exactly $3,400 to my name. I rented a suffocating 300 square foot studio above a loud, greasy diner. The smell of fried onions seeped into my only clothes. My company, Aeroflow Systems, existed only as lines of code. The concept was to use machine learning to predict supply chain disruptions during natural disasters and automatically reroute critical resources. For 2 years, I lived on cheap rice, tap water, and sheer spite. I pitched to hundreds of investors and was laughed out of the room. My lowest point hit when I ran out of money completely. I hadn't eaten a real meal in weeks. But then, a miracle happened. A retired executive named Arthur Sterling reached out online and invested $20,000 in Aeroflow. He was a godsend, asking brilliant questions and guiding my business model. But 6 months later, right when I was about to sign a lease for an office, Sterling abruptly pulled his funding, citing market viability concerns. The withdrawal almost bankrupted me. I had to sell my laptop and code on library computers. Desperate, I dug into Sterling's investment paperwork to see if I could legally force a grace period. That's when my blood froze. The signature on the contract matched a birthday card my father had given me years ago. The IP address for Sterling's emails traced back to Fairfield County. My father had created a fake identity to invest in my company, steal my business plans, and intentionally pull the rug out from under me to destroy my dreams, hoping I'd come crawling back to medicine. The betrayal was so profoundly evil it made me physically sick. But it didn't break me. It forged me into something untouchable. I swore I would build Aeroflow into a titan. Update 1.I. The next 3 years were a relentless, agonizing grind, but Aeroflow finally found its footing. We started landing government contracts to manage disaster relief. When a massive hurricane hit Miami, our AI system reduced emergency supply delivery times by 50%, ensuring no shelter ran out of clean water or medical gear. The media caught wind. I was featured in the Wall Street Journal. We expanded to 50 employees. But with success came inexplicable, catastrophic problems. Right before we were set to demonstrate our platform for a $15 million UN contract, our entire database was wiped by a sophisticated cyber attack. Years of proprietary code, gone. We lost the contract and nearly our entire reputation. I was devastated, but I wasn't stupid. I hired a top-tier cybersecurity firm. Their lead investigator, David Park, a former cybercrimes agent, spent 3 months doing a forensic analysis. When he called me into his office, he looked grim. "Leo, this wasn't a random hack," David said, sliding a thick file across the desk. "This was an inside job. Someone planted backdoors in your code over 2 years, and I traced the IP addresses of the attacks. They belonged to a shell corporation called Sterling Consulting." My heart stopped. "Sterling? Like Arthur Sterling?" "Yes," David nodded. "But it gets worse. Sterling Consulting shares an office floor with your brother Julian's law firm. Julian has been using this shell company to conduct corporate espionage against you. He didn't just sabotage the UN contract. He's been stealing your proprietary algorithms and selling them to your biggest competitors for the last 4 years. We estimate he's made over $18 million off your stolen intellectual property." I sat there, the air completely knocked out of my lungs. My father had tried to bankrupt me, and my brother had been systematically robbing and sabotaging me while I worked myself to the bone. I told David to document every single scrap of evidence. I wanted an ironclad record. But before I could figure out how to destroy them, a journalist named Maya Lin from Forbes magazine contacted me. She was doing a deep dive profile on me for the 30 Under 30 list. Maya was brilliant, sharp, and deeply empathetic. During her background research, she stumbled upon my obituary and the fake funeral. I ended up telling her the whole twisted truth about my family. 2 weeks later, Maya asked to meet me in person. She didn't have her recorder. She had a massive stack of legal documents. "Leo, I found something while digging into your parents' financials," she said softly, her eyes full of sorrow. "You aren't a Vance. You were adopted when you were 3 years old." The room spun. "What?" "Your biological parents were Thomas and Sarah Reed. They died in a car crash. Your biological father, Thomas, was a pioneer in computer-assisted logistics. He held 20 patents. His company was bought out for nearly $100 million before he died. That money, along with their life insurance, was put into a trust fund for you. You were supposed to inherit $35 million when you turned 30. I had turned 32 years ago." Maya slid bank records across the table. "Arthur and Eleanor Vance have been illegally controlling your trust fund. For 25 years, they've been living off the interest of your biological parents' money, and for the last 2 years, they've been actively draining the principal." The sheer, sickening irony of it all hit me like a freight train. My adoptive parents had disowned me, faked my death, and mocked me for pursuing technology while secretly funding their lavish lifestyle with the tech fortune my biological father had built. My talent wasn't a rebellion, it was literally in my blood. Maya published the Forbes article a week later. She titled it, "The Orphan Algorithm: How Family Rejection Led to a Humanitarian Tech Empire." She exposed the fake funeral. She highlighted my biological father's legacy. She left just enough breadcrumbs about the Vance family's shady financials to light a match. 12 hours after the article dropped, my mother sent the text inviting me to the Christmas party. Update 2. I didn't reply to my mother's text immediately. I was too busy staring at the FBI agent sitting in my office. Agent Rachel Cruz was a no-nonsense financial crimes investigator. She had shown up unannounced the morning of the Christmas party. "Mr. Vance, we've been investigating Dr. Arthur Vance for embezzlement," she explained, opening her briefcase. "Your father has been stealing from his hospital's surgical equipment budget to cover massive gambling debts. He's blown over $3.1 million at underground casinos. But worse, we discovered the unauthorized withdrawals from the Reed Trust Fund. We thought you were dead, Mr. Vance. Finding out you're alive changes this from standard fraud to a massive federal conspiracy." I told Agent Cruz everything. The fake funeral, the sabotage, Julian's IP theft. I handed over David Park's entire forensic file on Julian. Agent Cruz looked like she had just won the lottery. "They know we're closing in on them," Agent Cruz said, tapping the Forbes article on my desk. "Their lawyers are likely panicking. The only reason they invited you to this Christmas party is because they need you. They want to manipulate you into being a character witness, or coerce you into signing documents saying they had permission to use the trust." "What if I wore a wire tonight?" I asked, my voice terrifyingly steady. Agent Cruz smiled. "If you can get them to admit to the trust theft, the embezzlement, and the corporate espionage on tape, we can arrest them before New Year's." Which brings me back to sitting in my Tesla, staring at my mother's text. I took a deep breath, adjusted the tiny microphone taped to my sternum, and walked up to the house. When my father opened the door, he looked 10 years older. "Leo, you came." I didn't call him Dad. "Arthur, let's get this over with." I walked into the living room. My mother was wearing a black cocktail dress, looking incredibly nervous. Julian stood by the fireplace, sweating through his expensive suit. Next to him was a panicked-looking lawyer. "Leo, sweetheart, you look so successful," my mother cooed, her voice shaking. "Cut the act, Eleanor," I said, standing in the center of the room. "Why am I here?" The lawyer stepped forward. "Mr. Vance, there have been some baseless allegations made against your parents regarding a hospital budget and a certain trust fund. We were hoping, given your recent public success, you might provide a character reference stating your parents are moral people who used family funds for your benefit." I let out a harsh, echoing laugh. "For my benefit? You mean the $35 million trust fund left by my biological parents? The one you've been draining to pay off Arthur's $3.1 million illegal gambling debts?" My mother gasped, spinning to look at my father. "Gambling debts? Arthur, what is he talking about?" "Shut up, Eleanor," my father hissed, his face turning purple. "Leo, we raised you. We put a roof over your head. We were entitled to compensation for adopting you. So you admit you stole from the trust without my consent?" I asked calmly. "It was ours by right," my father screamed. "We saved you from the foster system. We just needed some liquidity, and you were supposedly dead to the world anyway." "Right," I nodded, turning to Julian. "And what about you, Julian? Were you entitled to the $18 million you made stealing my algorithms through Sterling Consulting?" Julian's jaw dropped. How? How do you know about Sterling?" "I know everything," I said, pulling out a thick stack of papers, copies of David's cyber report, and tossing them on the coffee table. "I know Dad created Arthur Sterling to bankrupt my startup, and I know you hijacked the shell company to sell my IP to my competitors. Dad sabotaged you first." Julian yelled, completely losing his composure, throwing his own father under the bus to save himself. "He set up the fake investor. I just saw an opportunity to monetize the backdoors he left open. It's not my fault your security was trash, Leo. You little parasite." My father roared at Julian. "I was trying to force him back to medical school. You were just lining your own pockets. At least I wasn't stealing millions from a hospital to blow on blackjack, you washed up hack," Julian screamed back. The lawyer had his face buried in his hands. It was glorious. They were ripping each other apart, confessing to every single federal crime on a silver platter, all being transmitted directly to Agent Cruz in the surveillance van down the street. "You know what the funniest part is?" I interrupted, my voice cutting through their screaming. "I came here tonight, wondering if I could ever forgive you, but you didn't call me here to apologize for faking my death. You called me here to use me one last time to save your own skin. Leo, please," my mother sobbed, reaching for me. "We're family. Family doesn't hold a funeral for a living son," I whispered, stepping back from her touch as if she were toxic. "Goodbye, Eleanor." I walked out the front door and down the driveway. I didn't even make it to my car before 4 black SUVs swarmed the property, red and blue lights flashing against the snow. Agent Cruz stepped out, giving me a curt nod as armed agents rushed the front door. I sat in my Tesla and watched as Dr. Arthur Vance, Eleanor Vance, and Julian Vance were dragged out of the mansion in handcuffs, screaming at each other all the way to the cruisers. 6 months later, the gavel fell. The audio recording was a slam dunk. Arthur received 15 years in federal prison for embezzlement, wire fraud, and trust fund theft. Eleanor got 10 years for conspiracy and money laundering. Julian, whose career was permanently destroyed, got 8 years for corporate espionage and intellectual property theft. The state seized the mansion and all their assets to pay back the hospital and replenish what they could of my trust. I didn't go to the sentencing. I was too busy living. With the recovered trust money and the explosive growth of Aeroflow, we expanded globally. We now manage disaster relief logistics for 30 different countries. Last month, Google acquired Aeroflow Systems for $5.2 billion, keeping me on as CEO to run their new humanitarian tech division. I also found my real family. My team at Aeroflow, the disaster relief workers I've partnered with, and Maya Lin, the journalist who helped uncover the truth. Maya and I started dating shortly after the arrests, and last week, I asked her to marry me. She said yes. Yesterday, I got a letter from Julian in prison, begging me to put money in his commissary account because he's struggling. I took the letter, walked over to my fireplace, and tossed it into the flames. I poured myself a glass of expensive scotch, watched the paper turn to ash, and smiled. They buried me 8 years ago. But they forgot that some seeds just need a little dirt to grow into something unbreakable. My parents stole my $40,000 college fund for my brother's fake AI startup. So I ghosted them, hacked his investors, and let the SEC do the rest. My parents staged a tearful dinner to tell me my college fund was wiped out by the stock market, only for me to catch them laughing days later about giving it all to my golden child brother. So, I completely erased my existence from their lives, built my own tech empire in secret, and waited for my brother to illegally use my name on a $1.5 million investor pitch to absolutely destroy him. I still remember the heavy, suffocating smell of baked ziti. That specific, garlicky aroma is permanently burned into my brain like a digital watermark, marking the exact timestamp when my entire reality shattered. We were sitting around our scratched mahogany dining table, me, my parents, and my older brother, Caleb. I was 18, buzzing with the adrenaline of just receiving my acceptance letter to Kingsford University. It was my dream school, boasting an engineering program that ranked in the top 10 nationally. It had the ivy-covered brick walls, the state-of-the-art labs, everything. I got in purely on merit, but even with the partial scholarships I secured, I desperately needed the college fund my parents had been promising me since I was a kid. They'd always told me not to worry. Focus on your grades, Leo, my dad would say, patting my shoulder. We've got the finances locked down, you just get the A's. So I did. I sacrificed parties, weekends, and normal teenage stuff to build a flawless transcript. But that night, my mom suddenly dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against her porcelain plate. She looked up at me, her eyes glassy and wide, wearing an expression that looked painfully rehearsed. Leo, she whispered, her voice trembling, your father and I. We need to talk to you about your college fund. My stomach plummeted into my shoes. My parents sat across from me, their hands tightly clasped together on the table like hostages to their own deception. Then, Dad delivered the killing blow. We lost everything, buddy. The fund, it's gone. Completely wiped out. They spun a masterful narrative. Dad blamed a sudden downturn in the stock market, a series of bad luck investments, and a volatile portfolio that evaporated overnight. Mom actually dabbed the corners of her eyes with a cloth napkin, sniffing softly as if she were mourning a sudden death in the family. Caleb, meanwhile, sat in absolute silence. His eyes darted between me and our parents, chewing his food slowly like a spectator watching a tragic play unfold. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, the shock was too absolute. I just numbly nodded, whispered, okay, and excused myself from the table. But as the days dragged on, the math in my head refused to balance. If we were so broke, why was Dad still wearing his luxury chronograph watch that cost more than my first semester's tuition? Why was Caleb's Instagram suddenly flooded with pictures of him flexing brand new Apple hardware, standing in front of premium co-working spaces with captions like, grind never stops. Big things coming? The truth spilled out on a random Tuesday night. I was coming back late from my best friend Noah's house. I slipped through the back door quietly, not wanting to wake anyone. As I stepped into the dark hallway, I heard voices floating from the kitchen. They were laughing. I froze behind the drywall. I still can't believe you managed to convince him, Mom was saying, her voice light, giggly, and completely devoid of the tears she'd weaponized at dinner. He bought the whole thing. Dad chuckled, a deep, satisfied sound. Hook, line, and sinker. The kid didn't even push back. Then, Caleb's voice chimed in, practically vibrating with excitement. That means we're good to go, right? The 40 grand will easily cover the initial startup costs. I've already got the front-end developer lined up. 40 grand. My stomach violently twisted. The air left my lungs in a silent rush. They weren't broke. The market didn't crash. They hadn't lost my college fund. They gave it to Caleb. I backed out of the house, my hands shaking so violently I dropped my keys on the concrete steps. I didn't even bother picking them up. I just walked. I walked for 3 miles in the freezing night air before my brain could even begin to process the magnitude of the betrayal. How do you reconcile the fact that the people who raised you, who cheered at your science fairs, who promised to protect you, had coldly stolen your future to fund your brother's vanity project? They didn't just choose him, they robbed me, lied to my face, and laughed about it in the dark. But they severely underestimated who they were dealing with. For years, I had been running a quiet side hustle. I refurbished broken laptops, flipped custom-built PCs, and resold tech hardware online. When I turned 17, Noah's uncle, a corporate accountant, had helped me set up a shell LLC to legally protect my assets and open a high-yield online savings account. I never thought I'd actually need to use it to hide from my own blood. Sitting on a cold curb at 2 a.m., bathed in the pale glow of a street lamp, I made a vow. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to demand the money back. I was going to surgically extract myself from their reality. I was going to vanish digitally, financially, and physically. The extraction began the second I got back to my room. I logged into the joint custodial account I shared with my parents. It held my official allowance and summer job scraps. They never monitored it closely, but my real money was funneled into my Ghost LLC account. I immediately withdrew every single cent from the joint account, exactly $3,215.50, and transferred it into my encrypted offshore-style online bank. Next, I sterilized my physical space. I packed up my custom laptop, my backup NAS drives, my Raspberry Pi cluster, and even my mechanical keyboard. Anything that held a byte of data was going with me. I factory reset my phone, wiped my browsers, set up a virtual VoIP number routed through a VPN, and bought a burner Chromebook with cash from a guy on Craigslist. I played the dutiful, depressed son for 4 more days. I washed the dishes. I thanked Dad when he patronizingly handed me a $20 bill for gas. But at night, I was a ghost in the machine. I applied for remote tech internships, online boot camps, and entry-level cybersecurity apprenticeships. Within 48 hours, I landed a remote shadow program with a boutique cybersecurity firm in Colorado. It paid monthly, required an NDA, and asked 0 questions about my physical location. By Sunday night, I had secured a month-to-month room rental above a quiet bookstore 2 towns over, paid entirely in advance. At 4:45 a.m. on Monday, I scheduled an Uber, grabbed my 2 duffel bags, and walked out the front door. I didn't leave a note, I didn't look back. Update 1. While I was busy building a new life from scratch, Caleb was busy playing Silicon Valley cosplay. I knew he was gearing up to launch his startup. He had been hyping it up in every family group chat, which I was now locked out of, and LinkedIn post. He called it Apex Logic, claiming it was an AI-powered financial modeling platform. This was genuinely hilarious to me because Caleb barely knew how to clear his browser cache, let alone train a machine learning model. 3 weeks after I ghosted my family, Apex Logic had its official launch party, flashy press releases, custom logos, a catered event downtown. I only found out because Noah, my one remaining tether to my old life, forwarded me the digital invitation. I opened the PDF and scrolled to the bottom. Tucked neatly into the special thanks and founding teams section was a name that made my blood run cold: Leo Cross, technical partner. They hadn't just stolen my money, they were using my name. Caleb knew he had 0 technical credibility, so he slapped my reputation, the kid who actually got into a top engineering school, onto his pitch deck to convince venture capitalists that he had legitimate tech backing. I stared at the screen for a solid hour. Then, a slow, dark smile crept across my face. They had tied my name to a fraudulent business, built with my stolen money, and they were too arrogant to realize they had just handed me the detonator to their entire operation. But I didn't sue. Lawsuits are loud, slow, and messy. I wanted a silent, catastrophic implosion. Over the next 2 months, I kept my head down. I coded for 12 hours a day. I built software for overseas clients, reverse engineered malware for practice, and leveled up my skills aggressively. My mentor at the Colorado firm took notice and started funneling me high-paying consulting contracts. I operated strictly under an alias, LC, Ledger. While Caleb was begging local angel investors for a $75,000 seed round, I had already banked over $15,000 in clean, untraceable consulting fees. Then, the universe handed me a loaded gun. It was 2 a.m. I was debugging a complex Python script for a logistics client in Tokyo when my burner email pinged. It was the old Gmail account tied to my original resume, the one I hadn't touched since the night I left. The subject line read, "Pre-seed round. Apex Logic." I clicked it. It was a forwarded email thread between 2 senior analysts at Horizon Ventures, a massive VC firm known for backing explosive fintech startups. The most recent message read, "Leo Cross is listed as the primary technical architecture partner on their founding page. He has verifiable engineering credentials. We need direct confirmation of his equity and involvement before we wire the funds. Can someone loop him in? They had CC'd my old email. They thought I was part of the pitch. My heart hammered against my ribs. I could have replied as myself, screamed fraud, and blown the whole thing up right there. But I wanted them to suffer the anxiety of the unknown. I drafted a meticulously corporate reply from my new alias, L.C. Ledger, CCing the analysts, regarding the listing of Mr. Leo Cross as a technical partner. This information is entirely fabricated. No signed agreements, NDAs, or equity stakes were ever formalized with Apex Logic. Please demand legally binding documentation from their CEO before proceeding with any capital deployment. Mr. Cross has zero involvement. I hit send and went to sleep. The next morning, Noah FaceTimed me, looking like he was about to explode with glee. Dude, did you see the startup forums? Horizon Ventures completely pulled out of Apex Logic. Word leaked that Caleb falsified his technical team credentials. His credibility is tanking. I watched from the shadows as Caleb scrambled to save face, frantically pivoting his launch as a closed beta. Meanwhile, I decided to do a little passive reconnaissance. Apex Logic's website was a disaster. It was built with sloppy, unsecured APIs and unfiltered forms. I found the public GitHub repository his chief developer had used. It was unencrypted. Worse, it was storing early user data in plaintext. I didn't hack anything. I just archived the public source code. I now held a digital bomb, but because my name was still vaguely associated with the site, I could be legally implicated if a data breach occurred. I hired a very real, very aggressive corporate lawyer using my new consulting money. We sent a certified cease and desist letter directly to Caleb's rented office. Remove all references to Leo Cross from your digital, promotional, and internal materials immediately. Failure to comply will result in federal legal escalation and public disclosure of gross misrepresentation. 24 hours later, my name was scrubbed from their website. No apology from Caleb, no text from my parents, just terrified silence. Update 2. Life on my end was thriving. I was pulling in 3 consistent enterprise clients. My monthly income had quadrupled. I moved out of the bookstore room and into a shared tech co-op space run by a brilliant, cynical guy named Julian. It had exposed brick, terrible espresso, and absolute freedom. I kept a spreadsheet on my desktop titled The Red Ledger. It tracked every dollar my parents stole, plus estimated interest. The current total sat at $42,500. But the revenge I was cooking? That was going to be priceless. 6 months after I left, Caleb's smug face popped up on my LinkedIn feed. It was a series of funding announcement. He was posing in front of a leased Porsche with a caption that made me want to vomit. Secured the bag, $1.5 million Series A locked with Richard Sterling. Time to scale. Number Apex Logic number, CEO number grind. I froze. $1.5 million? How? After the Horizon Ventures disaster and the sketchy backend, how did he con someone else? I clicked through the slide deck. He proudly attached to the post. Buried on slide 14, slightly blurred, was a familiar phrase: initial technology infrastructure designed in partnership with Leo Cross, currently operating as an independent advisor. He doubled down. He didn't remove my name. He just legally massaged it to make it look like I was a supportive, silent consultant. I immediately screenshotted it, archived it, and added a new tab to the Red Ledger: fraudulent representation, round 2. Later that week, I received a cryptic LinkedIn message from a guy named Sam T, whose title was UI/UX intern at Apex Logic. Hey Leo, saw your name in the series at Deck, thought you bailed? Also, you didn't hear this from me, but the internal tech is a dumpster fire. Let me know if you want to talk. We met at a dimly lit coffee shop near the financial district. Sam looked like he hadn't slept in a month. He ordered a black cold brew and immediately started spilling. I joined for the experience, Sam muttered, looking over his shoulder. Caleb promised we were building next-gen AI. Leo. It's a spreadsheet. The AI model is literally just an Excel macro with a slick user interface. We are charging enterprise clients to use a glorified calculator. And the data? It's completely unencrypted. I've warned him 5 times. Sam explained that Richard Sterling, the angel investor, was infamous for throwing money at buzzwords without doing proper due diligence. Caleb had sold him on machine learning and predictive blockchain, none of which existed. He used your name to close the deal, Sam said, sliding a sleek black thumb drive across the table. He told Sterling that you built the foundational code. I figured you'd want the internal logs. I walked back to my co-op with the holy grail of corporate espionage in my pocket. But before I could even plug the drive in, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. Hi sweetie. It's been so long. Caleb just secured massive funding. We are incredibly proud of him. Please call us. We want to celebrate as a family. Even now, after stealing my future, she only reached out to brag about the son who benefited from the theft. I didn't reply. I just opened my laptop. The thumb drive was a goldmine. Unfiltered emails, back-end screenshots, proof of fabricated financial projections, and blatant terms of service violations. But the cherry on top came from Noah a few days later. He sent me a screen recording of a private TikTok video Caleb had shared with his inner circle. In the video, Caleb was sitting in his leased office, sipping whiskey, laughing with two developers. Bro, you should have seen Leo's face when mom told him the stock market ate his college fund. Caleb laughed, wiping a tear from his eye. Kid looked like someone shot his dog. One of the developers chimed in, didn't you use that exact money to pay the AWS hosting fees? Caleb smirked, college fund, startup fund, same thing, right? The kid's a nerd, he'll get a scholarship. The rage that washed over me was cold, calculating, and absolute. I wasn't just going to ruin his business anymore, I was going to salt the earth. The next day, Julian, the co-op owner, tapped on my desk. Hey, LC. A massive financial firm just contacted us. They want to build an ethical, highly secure data modeling tool. They specifically said they saw the rumors about Apex Logic being a scam, and they want the exact opposite. You want the contract? I smiled. Tell them I start Monday. That night, I received an automated alert from a legal scraping bot I had set up. It was a state incorporation filing for Apex Logic, dated 3 days ago. Under the section titled Founding Officers, it listed Joshua, Caleb Cross, CEO. Leo Cross, CTO. He actually forged my name on state-level corporate filings to satisfy Richard Sterling's final due diligence requirements. This wasn't a civil dispute anymore. This was a federal crime. I didn't hesitate. I called Maya Vance, a notoriously ruthless tech investigative journalist for Silicon Wire. I had been quietly feeding her anonymous tips for weeks, but this time, I went on the record. Maya, I said into the phone. I have the internal logs, the fake AI source code, the forged state incorporation documents, and a video of the CEO admitting to stealing his initial seed money from his brother. Do you want the exclusive? She breathed heavily into the receiver. Send it all. Give me 48 hours. 2 days later, the article dropped like a tactical nuke. Headline, The Phantom CTO, How Apex Logic Fabricated Its Tech, Forged State Documents, and Conned Investors Out of $1.5 million. The article was a masterpiece. Maya included screenshots of the plaintext user data, quotes from Sam the intern, the forged incorporation documents, and a transcript of the TikTok video. She completely dismantled Caleb's AI claims, exposing it as a basic spreadsheet macro. Within 3 hours, Richard Sterling's legal team issued a public statement severing all ties with Apex Logic, announcing an immediate lawsuit for investor fraud and breach of contract. By noon, Apex Logic's website was offline. By 5 p.m., Caleb's LinkedIn profile was deleted. His empire didn't just crumble, it was vaporized. The fallout was spectacular. Tech Twitter was flooded with memes of Caleb's face. The SEC reportedly opened a preliminary inquiry into the forged state documents. I sat in my favorite chair at the co-op, sipping a painfully bitter espresso, watching the digital carnage unfold on my monitor. The red ledger was finally closed. Final balance, $44,120.75, paid in full via absolute destruction. That evening, I heard a frantic, heavy knocking at the door of my new apartment. I checked the security camera feed. It was my parents. I opened the door, leaving the chain on. My mother looked 10 years older. Her makeup was smudged, her hair a mess, and her eyes were frantic. My dad stood behind her, staring at his shoes, looking like a deflated balloon. Leo, please, Mom choked out, her voice cracking. Let us in. We need to talk to you. Caleb is in serious legal trouble. They're talking about fraud charges. You have to tell the press it was a misunderstanding. Please, you're his brother. I stared at her through the crack in the door, feeling absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just a profound, hollow emptiness. A misunderstanding? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. He forged my signature on state documents. He built a fraudulent company using $40,000 you stole from me. And you laughed about it. I heard you in the kitchen, Mom. Hook, line, and sinker. Remember? All the color drained from her face. She gasped, taking a physical step back as if I had struck her. Dad finally looked up, his face pale. Leo. We didn't know how to tell you. We thought he would succeed and pay you back tenfold. We thought you'd eventually forgive us. Leo. You didn't think about me at all, I replied coldly. You placed a bet on your favorite son using my chips, and he lost. Now you have to pay the house. He's going to lose everything, Mom wailed, gripping the doorframe. Please, Leo, don't do this to your family. I don't have a family, I said. I have a biological origin point that I have successfully severed ties with. Do not ever come to my home again, or I will have you arrested for trespassing. I shut the door in their faces and locked the deadbolt. I listened to my mother sob in the hallway for 5 minutes before my dad gently guided her away. I walked over to my desk, opened my laptop, and went back to work. 3 months later, I was invited to speak at the National Tech Ethics and Transparency Summit in Chicago. I stood on a brightly lit stage in front of 500 industry professionals. I didn't wear a suit, just a plain black t-shirt and jeans. I spoke about data security, the dangers of hyperinflated startup culture, and the critical importance of digital autonomy. I didn't mention Caleb by name, but everyone in the room knew exactly who I was. When I walked off the stage, the applause was deafening. When I returned to my hotel room that night, the front desk handed me a crumpled envelope that had been dropped off earlier. No return address. Inside was a hastily scribbled note on cheap paper. Leo. I lost the car. Sterling is suing me for everything. Mom and Dad had to remortgage the house to pay for my defense lawyers. I know I screwed up, but I'm still your brother. Maybe when the dust settles, we can build something real together. Caleb. I read the note twice. I didn't feel a shred of pity. He still didn't understand. He wasn't sorry for what he did, he was only sorry he got caught. I struck a match, lit the corner of the paper, and dropped it into the metal wastebasket, watching his desperate plea turn into meaningless gray ash. The next morning, I officially launched my own software product, the secure, ethical data modeling tool I had built with Julian. It had no fake AI buzzwords, no bloated promises, and no stolen capital. It was just clean, brilliant code. Within the first month, we crossed 20,000 active enterprise users. I didn't need to flaunt leased sports cars or post toxic hustle culture quotes on social media. I had something Caleb never had, and something my parents could never steal again: absolute, untouchable independence. Sometimes, when I'm driving through my old hometown to visit Noah, I pass by the neighborhood where I grew up. The house looks smaller now. The curtains are permanently drawn, the lawn is slightly overgrown, and there are no luxury cars in the driveway. It looks exactly like what it is, a monument to a bad investment. I never stop. I just keep driving, accelerating toward a future that is entirely, unequivocally mine. Top comments. User 1. This is the most satisfying execution of corporate and personal karma I have ever read. The fact that they literally laughed about stealing your future, only for you to systematically dismantle his entire fraudulent empire using nothing but the truth and a Wi-Fi connection, is absolute poetry. Your parents remortgaging their house to pay for his defense lawyers is the exact ending they deserved for betting on the wrong horse. Enjoy your success, man, you earned every single penny. User 2. As a software engineer, the part that made me physically cringe was him using an Excel macro and calling it AI. That alone deserves jail time, let alone forging state incorporation documents with your name. You played this flawlessly. By waiting for him to secure the Series A funding and file official government paperwork, you let him elevate the crime from a civil dispute to federal fraud. Utterly brilliant. User 3. I have a biological origin point that I have successfully severed ties with. Is greater than. Put this on a t-shirt immediately. The absolute audacity of your mother to show up at your door, not to apologize for stealing $40,000 from you, but to beg you to save the golden child from the consequences of his own illegal actions. You are a legend for shutting that door. Never look back. My parents stole my $5.2 million inheritance, mocked my paramedic career, and hired a hitman when I confronted them. Then the FBI raided their home, and I inherited their $60 million empire. Original post. I'm Liam, 31, and until about a year ago, I genuinely thought I understood my family dynamic. I knew it was toxic, I knew I was the black sheep, but I thought I knew the boundaries of their cruelty. I was dead wrong. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my parents, and my legacy was a meticulously crafted, completely psychotic fabrication. We lived in Greenwich, Connecticut, one of those ridiculously upscale, ultra-wealthy enclaves where everyone drives a Porsche, lives behind iron gates, and acts like they're royalty. My dad, Robert, was a high-powered corporate real estate attorney. He was the kind of guy who wore bespoke suits on weekends and spoke to service workers like they were stray dogs. My mom, Eleanor, hadn't worked a single day since marrying him. She spent her days oscillating between tennis clubs, charity galas, where she did zero actual charity work, and med spas. She carried herself with this suffocating arrogance, always armed with a designer bag and a condescending glare that could freeze boiling water. Then there was my younger brother, Connor. Connor was their masterpiece, a golden child engineered for the Ivy League, destined for corporate law, and programmed to never, ever question our parents. He got straight A's, captained the debate team, schmoozed at country club dinners, and followed their elitist life plan to the absolute letter. He was everything I wasn't, and frankly, everything I never wanted to be. From day one, I was the family disappointment. Why? Because I became a paramedic. I literally save lives for a living. I pull people out of crushed vehicles, restart hearts, and hold the hands of terrified people during the worst moments of their lives. But to Robert and Eleanor, I might as well have been a garbage collector. The pay was decent, the benefits were good, but it wasn't respectable. It didn't fit the pristine, old money image they had spent decades cultivating. Men in our family don't work in service jobs. My dad would sneer over Thanksgiving dinners, his voice dripping with absolute disgust. We are professionals, Liam. We wear suits and command boardrooms. We don't wear cheap uniforms and wipe up blood. My mom was somehow even worse. What on earth am I supposed to tell people my son does? She would complain, looking physically nauseous. An ambulance driver? What will the neighbors think? What will I tell the women at the club? You are humiliating us on purpose. This is where my blood always boiled, because their elitist attitude was a massive, hypocritical lie. My grandfather, my dad's father, Arthur, was a combat medic in Vietnam. He came home with nothing, started a local construction company from scratch, and built half the commercial properties in our county through sheer grit, sweat, and blistered hands. He died when I was 24, but Grandpa Arthur was my absolute hero. While my parents tried to brainwash me into becoming a soulless corporate drone, Grandpa Arthur would sit with me on his weathered back porch, drinking black coffee, telling me stories about saving lives under heavy fire. He taught me about the honor of helping people when they are broken. Not everyone is meant for a boardroom, Liam, he'd tell me, his eyes distant but warm. Some people are called to serve, to be the one who shows up when everything goes straight to hell. There is more honor in that than in billing hours and pushing papers. My parents despised our bond. They saw my grandfather as a blue-collar embarrassment who was filling my head with working-class nonsense. The final, nuclear blow-up happened during my senior year of high school. I told them I was applying to emergency medical programs instead of their pre-approved list of elite universities. You are throwing your entire life away. My mom screamed, her face flushed with pure rage. My friends' children are going to Yale and Harvard to become surgeons and hedge fund managers, and my son wants to be a glorified taxi driver for sick people. At least I'll actually be helping people, I shot back, completely exhausted by her shallow existence. While your friends' kids push papers and overcharge clients for every second they breathe. Dad stepped in with his usual manipulative guilt trip. Your grandfather has filled your head with this romanticized garbage. We have given you every conceivable advantage in life, Liam, and this is how you repay us? By dragging our name through the mud? That comment pushed me over the edge. At least Grandpa actually worked for every single dime he has, instead of just marrying into it and acting superior. I yelled, staring directly into my mother's eyes. The silence that followed was heavy and dangerous. Then, my mother stepped forward and slapped me across the face. Hard. It was the first and only time she ever hit me. How dare you speak to me like that in your father's house? She hissed. It's his house. Yeah, I said, my cheek burning. You just live here and spend his money. After that, the freeze-out began. They refused to pay a single cent toward my education, which was fine by me. I took out student loans, worked night shifts, and preferred the freedom of not owing them my soul. We remained coldly civil until Grandpa Arthur died suddenly of a massive stroke. The funeral was incredibly disturbing. My parents didn't shed a single tear. In fact, they looked almost relieved, like a heavy burden had finally been lifted. Afterward, my dad handled all the legal arrangements, waving me off. It's just some old, messy business debts and a tiny life insurance policy that barely covers the burial, he told me dismissively. Arthur was never good with money, spent it all keeping that dinosaur of a construction company afloat. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? Fast forward 7 years. I was 31, doing great. I had paid off my truck, built up a solid savings account, and was dating an amazing pediatric nurse named Sarah who actually respected what I did. Life was peaceful. Then, the pandemic hit. Emergency services became an absolute war zone. I was working 80-hour weeks, surrounded by death, fear, and a virus we didn't understand. I watched people suffocate daily. The psychological toll was unimaginable. Eventually, I hit a wall and burned out completely. I was medically diagnosed with severe PTSD and physical exhaustion, requiring a mandatory 4-month leave of absence. During my recovery, I burned through my entire savings and racked up some credit card debt. It wasn't insurmountable, but I was 2 months behind on rent and facing eviction if I didn't get an immediate cash infusion. So, in a moment of sheer desperation, I did the one thing I swore I would never do. I swallowed my pride and called my parents for a loan. I asked for $18,000, promising to pay it back with 10% interest within a year. My dad's response was chillingly smug. Well, Liam, maybe this will finally teach you that your grandfather's working-class advice was garbage. Perhaps you'll reconsider that law school application now that you see how the real world operates. My mom chimed in on speakerphone, her voice practically vibrating with glee. We warned you, Liam, we told you that job was beneath you. The emotional toll, the pathetic salary. It's time to grow up and get a real career. I can make some calls and get you an entry-level desk job at a respectable firm. I am a licensed paramedic with 7 years of experience. I save lives, I said, my voice shaking with suppressed anger. Temporarily, she laughed. Until you have another little mental breakdown. What is your long-term plan? You have zero transferable skills. I hung up on them. I applied for a high-interest personal loan instead, got approved, and clawed my way back to financial stability over the next 8 months. I swore on my life I would never speak to them again unless absolutely necessary. But then, about a year ago, things started getting incredibly bizarre. My parents, who were already wealthy, suddenly started spending money like they were billionaires. I'm talking brand new $150,000 cars every 6 months. Lavish, month-long vacations to Monaco and Dubai. My mom was dripping in new diamonds and buying Birkin bags that cost more than my annual salary. They purchased a sprawling, $8 million waterfront mansion in Naples, Florida, as a winter cottage. My dad started wearing Patek Philippe watches. It made 0 sense. Dad was a successful lawyer, yes, but he wasn't, buy an $8 million second home in cash successful. My curiosity got the better of me, so I started doing some digging through public property and business records. It's amazing what you can find online if you know where to look. I discovered that 3 years prior, they had launched a commercial real estate firm called Sterling Development LLC. They had somehow acquired prime commercial real estate in our county for pennies on the dollar through a highly complex trust transfer. But here was the sickening part. The land they were developing was the exact same land that used to belong to my grandfather's construction company, the company my dad swore had gone bankrupt and dissolved. The timeline was completely wrong. The math didn't add up. I decided to test the waters. I went over for a rare family dinner. Mom was parading around in a new Chanel dress, and Dad was loudly bragging about expanding his development firm into the New York market. Must be nice having all that secret family money to invest, I said casually, taking a sip of my water. The dining room went dead silent. The temperature in the room plummeted. What family money? Dad asked, his voice suddenly tight and dangerously quiet. You know, from Grandpa Arthur's estate, the properties. The land you're building on, I said, holding his gaze. The look that passed between my parents was pure, unadulterated panic. It was the look of two criminals who just realized the cops were at the door. Liam, Mom said, her voice trembling slightly as she tried to sound soothing. Your grandfather died completely broke. We explained this to you years ago. But your massive new development project is sitting right on top of his old commercial lots. I pushed, land that we purchased fair and square from the bank after it was foreclosed on, Dad snapped, his face reddening, through proper legal channels. Every instinct I had from years on the streets told me they were lying through their teeth. How much did you pay for it? I asked. That is confidential corporate information, and this conversation is over, Dad barked, slamming his fist on the table. I left that night knowing my parents were hiding a massive, dark secret. I just didn't realize how evil that secret truly was until I went looking for the truth. Update 1. 2 weeks after that disastrous dinner, I drove down to Grandpa Arthur's old neighborhood. I figured some of the longtime residents might remember something about his business affairs that my parents conveniently forgot. I knocked on the door of Mrs. Gable, a sharp, 79-year-old retired teacher who had lived across the street from Arthur for 40 years. When I introduced myself, her face lit up. Liam. Oh my lord, you look exactly like him, she beamed, ushering me inside for iced tea. Arthur talked about you every single day. He was so incredibly proud that you became a medic. He used to sit on my porch and say, that boy is the only one in my bloodline who actually understands what a soul is worth. We talked for hours. She told me stories about how Grandpa used to fix single mothers' roofs for free and quietly pay for groceries for families who were struggling. Then, her expression darkened, and she looked at me with a profound sadness. He was so relieved when he finalized the paperwork to leave the entire business to you, she said quietly. I froze. My lungs stopped working. What paperwork? The trust and the will, she said, looking confused. He had it all set up with a fancy lawyer downtown. He told me Robert was too arrogant and would just liquidate the company to buy country club memberships. He wanted you to have the properties, the business, all of it, so you could be secure while you saved lives. Mrs. Gable. I stammered, my hands suddenly shaking. My parents told me he died completely broke. They said there was nothing but debt. She stared at me for a long, horrifying minute, her jaw tightened. Wait right here. She went into her back bedroom and emerged 10 minutes later holding a heavy, taped-up shoebox. Arthur gave me copies of everything, she said, her voice thick with anger. He told me, if anything happens to me, and Robert tries to pull a fast one, you make sure Liam gets this box. Your parents came around snooping after the funeral, asking if Arthur had left anything with the neighbors. I played dumb. I knew they were snakes. I opened the box on her coffee table. Inside were pristine, blue-backed legal documents, a last will and testament, trust formation documents, 7 different property deeds, and bank statements. According to these documents, Arthur Sterling had left absolutely everything to me. His house, his construction equipment, 7 prime commercial lots, and $1.5 million in liquid cash. The total estimated value of the estate at the time of his death was $5.2 million. I was meant to be a millionaire at 24. Why didn't I know? I whispered, feeling physically sick. Because your parents made sure you didn't, she said bitterly. They contested the will the second he was in the ground, claimed Arthur was suffering from severe dementia and didn't know what he was doing. They argued that he had been manipulated into leaving his empire to a confused, uneducated young kid instead of his brilliant, responsible lawyer son. But I was an adult. I was 24. Doesn't matter when your father is a connected real estate lawyer who knows exactly which judges to talk to, she said. They tied it up in probate court, buried it in legal red tape, and had it quietly invalidated behind closed doors. I drove home in an absolute daze, the shoebox sitting on my passenger seat like a live grenade. The timeline finally made sense. My parents hadn't just inherited a business. They had systematically, legally robbed me of my grandfather's legacy, erased his final wishes, and used my money to build a $60 million empire. The next morning, I drove straight to their house. I was ready to kick the door in and demand answers. But when I pulled onto their street, I saw a massive, 18-wheel moving truck parked in their circular driveway. Professional movers were sprinting back and forth, loading antique furniture and expensive art. My parents were standing on the lawn, frantically barking orders, looking completely unhinged. They were trying to flee. I parked my truck blocking the driveway and walked up to them. Going somewhere? I asked. They spun around, their faces draining of blood. My mom actually gasped and took a step back. Liam, Dad said, his voice cracking as he tried to project authority. We were going to call you. We're relocating to the Naples house permanently. The market is better in Florida. That's funny, I said, holding up the shoebox for them to see. Because I thought you might be running from the fact that I just spent the evening reading Grandpa Arthur's original will, the one where he left his $5.2 million estate to me. Mom let out a high-pitched, hysterical laugh. Those are forgeries. Someone is trying to scam you, Liam. You need to throw that garbage away. Really? Because I also have the probate court dockets from when you contested it. I stepped closer, my voice echoing across the manicured lawn. The movers had stopped working and were openly staring. I know everything. I know you claimed he had dementia. I know you stole my inheritance, liquidated his assets, and used it as seed money for sterling development. Dad's eyes darted around the neighborhood. Keep your voice down, you entitled little brat, he hissed, dropping the fake nice act. Your grandfather was a senile old fool who was brainwashed by anti-rich propaganda. He wanted to hand a multi-million-dollar business to an ambulance driver who barely makes minimum wage. We protected the family assets. You stole my money. I roared. Dad lunged at me. He grabbed my jacket collar, trying to physically shove me toward the street. Get off my property before I have you arrested for trespassing. I am 6'3" and I spend my days deadlifting 250-pound patients on stretchers. My dad is 5'9" and spends his days eating catered sushi at a mahogany desk. I didn't throw a punch, but I grabbed his wrists, twisted them off my jacket, and shoved him backward hard enough that he stumbled and fell onto his perfectly manicured grass. Don't you ever lay a hand on me again, I growled. Mom started screaming at the top of her lungs. Assault. He's assaulting your father. Call 911. Call the police. Neighbors were stepping out onto their porches. The movers were pulling out their phones. It was a complete spectacle. The will was legally invalidated by a judge. Dad yelled from the grass, his face purple with rage. Everything was handled through the proper courts. You have nothing. Through fraud and perjury, I corrected, walking back to my truck. I'll see you in court. Don't bother unpacking in Florida. I didn't go home. I drove straight to the offices of Jessica Vance, one of the most ruthless, high-powered estate litigation attorneys in the state. I slammed the shoebox on her desk and told her the whole story. Jessica reviewed the documents for about 30 minutes in total silence. When she finally looked up, her eyes were gleaming with the predatory thrill of a lawyer who just found the case of a lifetime. Liam, she said, tapping the will. If we can prove they lied about his mental state, this isn't just a civil dispute, this is massive estate fraud. They committed perjury. And if they used your stolen assets to secure loans for their new development company, we aren't just going after the original $5.2 million. We are going after the entire current value of the empire they built with your money. How much do you think that is? I asked. Based on the commercial properties they currently own, upwards of $50 to $60 million. We went to war. Jessica hired a forensic accountant who dug into every single financial transaction my parents had made over the last 7 years. We tracked down former employees of my grandfather's company who were willing to testify that Arthur was sharp as a tack until the day he died. We even found the retired lawyer who drafted the original will, and he provided detailed notes proving Arthur was perfectly sane and intentionally bypassing my father. But the forensic accountant found the Holy Grail. He discovered emails and bank transfers proving my parents had started laying the groundwork for sterling development times 6 months before my grandfather even died. They had been meeting with investors and securing preliminary loans using Arthur's properties as proposed collateral while he was still alive and healthy. It was premeditated theft. They hadn't contested the will out of shock. They contested it because it interfered with a corporate takeover they had already planned. Jessica filed an emergency motion to reopen the estate based on newly discovered evidence of catastrophic fraud. The first hearing was brutal. My parents showed up with three $1,000 an hour defense attorneys, looking arrogant and completely unbothered. But the judge, a no-nonsense woman named Reynolds, was not playing games. When Jessica presented the forensic accountant's report and the retired lawyer's affidavit, Judge Reynolds actually took her glasses off and stared at my father with utter disgust. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, her voice echoing in the silent courtroom, "these documents suggest a level of premeditated, systematic fraud that frankly turns my stomach. If these allegations hold up, you are looking at multiple felony charges." My dad's lead attorney jumped up. "Your Honor, this is a baseless shakedown by a financially unstable, estranged son." "Sit down, counselor," Judge Reynolds snapped. "I have read the financial flowcharts. This is highly coordinated estate fraud." She slammed her gavel. "I am ordering the estate immediately reopened. Furthermore, I am issuing a blanket asset freeze on all personal and business accounts belonging to Robert and Eleanor Sterling, and Sterling Development LLC. And given the clear evidence of perjury, I am referring this entire file to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation." My parents looked like they had been hit by a freight train. My mom physically collapsed into her chair, gasping for air. Dad's face went completely white. They couldn't touch a single penny of their $60 million. It was all frozen. Update 2. The fallout was apocalyptic. That night, my mother called me from a burner phone, screaming and sobbing so hysterically I could barely understand her. "You have ruined us," she shrieked. "Our accounts are locked. My credit cards are declining. We can't even pay the movers. You are a monster. You are destroying your own family over money." "No," I said coldly, "I'm destroying you over the truth. You stole my life, Mom. We are your parents," she wailed. "We took that money to build a legacy for the family." "You took it to buy Birkin bags and mansions," I replied, and hung up. But they didn't just roll over. They got desperate, and desperate people do psychotic things. A week later, my apartment was broken into. They didn't steal my TV or my laptop, they systematically ransacked my filing cabinets and destroyed my computer hard drive, clearly looking for the original documents, which were safely locked in Jessica's firm's vault. Then, someone called the hospital where I worked and anonymously reported that I was stealing fentanyl from the ambulances. I was subjected to a humiliating internal investigation and a mandatory drug test, which I passed perfectly, clearing my name, but the stress was maddening. Then came the phone call that blew the entire situation into the stratosphere. It was Connor, my perfect, golden child brother. I hadn't spoken to him in years. He asked to meet at a diner on the edge of town. When I walked in, Connor looked like a ghost. He had lost weight, he had dark circles under his eyes, and his hands were shaking violently around his coffee mug. "They are losing their minds, Liam," Connor whispered, looking over his shoulder. "The criminal investigation is expanding. The DA is looking at federal racketeering charges because they funneled the money across state lines to buy the Florida house. Dad's law firm fired him yesterday." "Good," I said, feeling no sympathy. "Why are you here, Connor?" Connor took a deep breath, tears welling in his eyes. Because I knew, Liam. I didn't know the full extent of the fraud, but I knew Grandpa left you the money. I overheard them talking about it when I was 19. I kept my mouth shut because I didn't want them to cut off my tuition for Yale. I stared at him, feeling a new kind of betrayal wash over me. "You let them steal my life so you could go to frat parties? I hate myself for it every single day," Connor choked out, crying freely now. "But Liam, you have to listen to me. You are in severe danger. Dad is cornered. He's facing a decade in prison, and the loss of his entire fortune. Last night, I heard him on the phone with a guy he knows from his shady real estate dealings. A fixer, Liam. They are trying to hire someone to make you disappear before the civil trial starts. If you're dead, the estate defaults back to them as your next of kin." My blood turned to ice. My own parents were trying to have me assassinated. I left the diner and drove straight to the police station. I met with the lead detective on the fraud case and told him everything Connor said. The police didn't waste a single second. They put me in a hotel under 24/7 police protection and immediately brought Connor in for a recorded statement. The police tapped my dad's phones. It only took 4 days for him to incriminate himself completely. They recorded Robert Sterling agreeing to pay a hitman, who turned out to be an undercover federal agent, $100,000 to stage a fatal car accident for me. The FBI raided my parents' temporary rental house at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. The detective let me listen to the police scanner. They dragged my father out in handcuffs while he was wearing silk pajamas. My mother was screaming at the federal agents, threatening to sue them, right up until they slapped the cuffs on her wrists and read her rights. The charges were staggering: massive wire fraud, bank fraud, perjury, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit murder. The news hit the wealthy Greenwich community like a nuclear bomb. Elite lawyer and wife arrested in murder-for-hire plot against paramedic son. Their faces were plastered on every local news channel. Their country club friends instantly abandoned them. The socialite women who used to kiss my mom's feet acted like they had never met her. Faced with irrefutable wiretap evidence and a mountain of forensic accounting, my parents' defense crumbled. To avoid a drawn-out, highly publicized trial, they agreed to a global settlement in the civil case. Every single asset belonging to Sterling Development LLC, the $8 million Naples mansion, the luxury cars, and their personal bank accounts were transferred directly to me. I took everything. The total estimated value of the empire I seized was just north of $60 million. 6 months later, the criminal trial concluded. My parents took a plea deal to avoid life sentences. I sat in the front row of the federal courtroom on the day of their sentencing. My dad looked aged 20 years. His hair was completely white, and he kept his eyes glued to the floor. My mom was a shell of her former self, trembling in an orange jumpsuit, completely stripped of her designer armor and arrogance. The judge sentenced them both to 25 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 15 years. As the bailiffs led them away in chains, my mother stopped and looked back at me. "Liam," she sobbed, her voice echoing in the silent room. "Please, we're your family. Don't let them do this to us." I looked her dead in the eyes and gave her the exact same sneer she used to give me. "Temporarily," I said, "until you die in there." I didn't keep their dirty real estate empire. I hired a management firm to liquidate the entire portfolio. After paying off the corporate debts, taxes, and Jessica's massive but well-deserved legal fees, I walked away with $85 million in clean, liquid cash. I took a large portion of that money and created the Arthur Sterling Foundation. We provide full-ride scholarships, living stipends, and mental health support for young people entering emergency medical services and firefighting. I even bought back my grandfather's original commercial lot and built a state-of-the-art paramedic training facility on it. Connor dropped out of corporate law entirely. The guilt broke him, but he's trying to make amends. He went back to school for social work and now works as an advocate for foster children. We are slowly, very slowly, rebuilding our relationship. He's a different person now. My parents have tried writing to me from federal prison. Their letters are pathetic. Mom complains about the quality of the prison food and begs me to put money in her commissary account so she can buy decent shampoo. Dad tries to guilt-trip me about ruining the Sterling family legacy. I take their letters, unopened, and feed them directly into my paper shredder. I am completely financially secure for the rest of my life, but I didn't quit my job. I went back to work as a paramedic. I still ride in the back of the ambulance, I still wear the uniform, and I still hold people's hands on the worst days of their lives. Because Grandpa Arthur was right. There is no honor in boardrooms and bank accounts. The only thing that actually matters in this world is who you are when the sirens are blaring and everything goes to hell. My fiancée and her family secretly packed up my kids and left for a $14,200 vacation while I slept. Then her sister accidentally texted me, "Our plan worked." So I canceled the booking, shut off my phone, and let them freeze. My name is Arthur. I'm 34 years old, and I am a heavy-duty diesel mechanic. That means I spend my days elbow deep in massive, complicated engines, diagnosing problems that other people ignore until the whole machine grinds to a catastrophic halt. I fix things for a living. I like systems that make sense, agreements that are clear, and warning lights that tell you exactly what is about to break. But the morning my fiancée left me behind, my life didn't just stall out, it snapped clean in half, and I never even saw the warning light flashing. I woke up at 6:30 a.m. to a silence that absolutely did not belong in my house. Normally, my mornings are a beautiful, chaotic symphony. My 8-year-old son, Leo, usually has the television blasting some loud cartoon-themed song, while my 6-year-old daughter, Mia, is busy slapping her little bare feet down the hardwood hallway. There is usually the smell of dark roast coffee brewing, the faint hum of the refrigerator, and the sound of my fiancée, Chloe, rushing around trying to find her phone charger. But that morning, there was just a heavy, suffocating nothing, the kind of silence that rings in your ears. For a split second, my sleep-addled brain tried to rationalize it. I thought maybe I had slept through my alarm. Maybe everyone was already up, dressed, and waiting for me in the kitchen. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, threw off the heavy winter quilt, and walked out of the bedroom. The first thing I noticed was the hallway. The winter coats were missing from their brass hooks. The shoe rack, usually overflowing with tiny light-up sneakers and heavy winter boots, looked like it had been vacuumed clean. Even the embroidered Christmas stockings, mine, Leo's, Mia's, and Chloe's, were entirely gone from the living room mantel, as if we had never existed in this house at all. I walked into the kitchen. The marble island was completely bare. No hastily scribbled note saying, "We'll be back soon." No text message on my phone, no missed calls, just a cold, empty room. My stomach dropped so fast I felt physically nauseous. I ran to the front door and threw it open. The biting December wind hit my face, but I didn't care. I stared at my driveway, it was completely empty. Usually, even on a quiet Sunday morning, there is something out there. A neighbor walking a dog, a delivery van, the distant hum of a snowplow, anything that tells you the world is still spinning. But looking at the tire tracks leading away from my house in the fresh snow, it felt like the entire world had packed up and left without me. Panic, cold and sharp, seized my chest. I grabbed my phone from the kitchen counter. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the screen. I opened our family group chat. The last message was from Chloe's mother, Helen, sent at 9 p.m. the night before. Big trip tomorrow. Everyone be ready early. 4 cars, 17 people. It's going to be magical. I had replied with a simple thumbs up emoji and we're packed and ready, because that was what we always did. That was the plan. But when I tried to scroll up to find the address of the resort we were supposed to be driving to, the chat suddenly vanished. It wasn't muted. It wasn't archived. I had been completely removed from the group. I tried to search the word family in my messages, typing frantically like a fool, hoping I could somehow summon my place back into their inner circle. Nothing. I immediately called Chloe's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times, and then went straight to voicemail. She was forwarding my calls. My breathing turned shallow. I hit the contact for Helen, my mother-in-law. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was incredibly cheerful, light, and breezy, as if she had been sitting there waiting for my name to flash on her screen. Arthur, good morning, honey, we're on the road, she chirped. What road? My voice came out as a desperate, raspy bark. Where is everyone? Where is Chloe? There was a long, agonizing pause on the other end of the line. I could practically hear the gears turning in Helen's head as she calculated exactly how much of the truth she was willing to feed me. Oh, Helen said, her tone feigning innocent surprise. You mean you're not already going? Already going where, Helen? I shouted, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter so hard my knuckles turned white. Another pause. Then she laughed. It was a light, airy, dismissive laugh, as if we were having a mild mix-up over who was bringing the potato salad to a summer barbecue. Well, we all just thought you were meeting us there later, Arthur. Meeting them times there. 17 people. 4 cars. A massive, highly coordinated family trip. And the one crucial detail they had conveniently forgotten to share with me was the actual address of the destination. I looked around my empty living room again. I saw the empty space where my kids' backpacks usually sat. I saw the missing toothbrushes in the bathroom. My chest tightened until it felt like my ribs were going to crack. My kids aren't here, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, trembling whisper. Helen, where the hell are my kids? Oh, sweetheart, Helen cooed, her voice suddenly dripping with thick, syrupy condescension. They're with us. They're perfectly fine. We just didn't want to wake you. You looked so exhausted last night after work. You know how much you work, Arthur. I couldn't speak. My jaw locked. What do you even say to a woman who just casually admits that she and your fiancé packed up your minor children and smuggled them out of your own home while you were unconscious in the next room? I stared blindly at the kitchen wall until the white paint blurred into a gray haze. Helen just kept talking, filling the silence with her practiced, manipulative drivel, acting as if she could smooth over a kidnapping with enough polite words. Everyone just assumed you would drive separate. You know how chaotic it gets with 17 people. We had to leave at 4:30 a.m. to make the early check-in. It was just easier this way. Check-in? I repeated, my brain barely processing the words. Oh, yes. Chloe handled all the booking details. It's all perfectly set, don't you worry about a thing. My mouth tasted like metallic copper. Put Chloe on the phone, right now. She's driving, Arthur, hands on the wheel. Then tell her to pull the damn car over. I roared. I heard Helen sigh. It was an irritated, deeply practiced sigh of a woman who was used to getting her way. Arthur, please, don't make this dramatic. It's Christmas. We are just trying to have a nice, peaceful family holiday. Just meet us there later, okay? You'll feel so silly about yelling once you get here and see everyone having fun. I hung up the phone without saying another word. I stood in my empty house for exactly 2 hours, pacing the floorboards, trying to convince myself not to call the police and report my children kidnapped. I kept telling myself that Chloe was their stepmother-to-be, that they were safe, that maybe this really was just an unbelievable string of miscommunications. Then, at 8:45 a.m., my phone buzzed on the counter. It was an image file. A screenshot sent directly to me by Maya, Chloe's younger sister. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. It was a screenshot of an entirely different group chat. A chat I had never seen before. The thread title was Real Family Xmas with a little snowflake emoji. I scanned the messages. Maya had sent a text saying, "Is he still asleep?" Chloe had replied, "Yes. We got the kids in the car. We are pulling out of the neighborhood now." But it was the very last message in the screenshot, sent by Maya, That made the blood freeze in my veins. He's really not here. Oh my god. Our plan actually worked. The mechanic is staying home. Maya hadn't meant to send that screenshot to me. She had clearly meant to send it to one of her friends to brag about their successful deception, but in her arrogant excitement, she had clicked my contact name by mistake. I read the words again. Plan. Worked. My hands went ice cold, my face flushed with a burning, radiating heat. I didn't call them back. I didn't scream into a pillow. I didn't type out a massive, emotional paragraph begging for an explanation. I didn't ask why. I simply typed 2 words and hit send. Merry Christmas. Then, I opened my laptop, logged into my email, found the reservation confirmation for the luxury winter lodge, and I quietly clicked cancel booking. The total cost was $14,200. It had been sitting entirely on my American Express card. The cancellation policy was strict, but because I was canceling on the exact day of check-in due to a family emergency, the automated system processed a 50% refund and completely voided the reservation. The lodge was now legally vacant and immediately released back onto the public market. And then, I waited for step 2. It didn't take long. At exactly 10:03 a.m., my phone lit up like a dying star. 1 missed call, 10 missed calls, 40 missed calls. By 10:15 a.m., I had 114 missed calls and a barrage of frantic text messages. One voicemail from Chloe just consisted of her hyperventilating and screaming the word, emergency. If you are wondering why I had the power to cancel their entire family vacation with a single click, it is because I was the one who paid for every single drop of their family magic. That was the unspoken arrangement of my relationship. That was the toll I had to pay to be allowed into their world. I met Chloe 4 years ago. She brought her beat-up 2014 Honda Civic into my shop. It was making a horrific, grinding metal on metal sound that sends shivers down any mechanic's spine. Her brake pads were completely gone, and the rotors were gouged to hell. When I printed out the estimate and showed her the damage, she looked terrified. She had tears in her eyes. I don't have that kind of money, she whispered, her voice tiny and defeated. I should have stayed professional. I should have pointed her to a bank for a loan. But she had this incredible softness in her eyes. She looked like someone who just needed a break. So, I bent the rules. I ordered her parts at absolute cost, didn't charge her a dime for the 6 hours of labor, and let her pay me back in small installments. The first time she came back to the shop, she brought me a thermos of hot coffee and homemade brownies as a thank you. She smiled at me like I had hung the moon. We started dating. She didn't flinch when I told her I was a single dad. My ex-wife had walked out on us when Mia was just a baby, completely abandoning her family for a guy she met at a bar. Chloe didn't treat my kids like a burden. She played with them, brushed Mia's hair, and helped Leo with his math homework. For a long time, it felt like we were building something genuine. A real home. But Chloe didn't come alone. She came as a package deal with a family that operated like a localized mafia. Her mother, Helen, was a real estate agent who hadn't sold a property in 3 years but insisted on driving a leased luxury SUV and wearing designer clothes. Her sister, Maya, was a 25-year-old aspiring influencer who refused to get a real job because it would interfere with her aesthetic. They treated family togetherness like a cult religion. At first, I thought it was just loud, chaotic love. But then the financial bleeding started. Helen loved using the word times family the way a mechanic uses a crowbar to pry open whatever she wanted. Family vacations together, she would say. Family supports each other. Family contributes. And in their dictionary, contributes exclusively meant times Arthur pays for it. It started small. I would cover the bill at Sunday dinners because I made the most money. Then I was fronting the cash for Maya's emergency vet bills. Then I was paying the deposit on their summer Airbnb rentals. They had incredibly expensive taste and an absolute talent for making me feel guilty if I didn't fund it. I tried to talk to Chloe about it. Your mom treats me like a walking ATM, I told her one night while washing dishes, and Maya constantly makes snide comments about my blue-collar job. Chloe would just kiss my cheek, look away, and whisper, they just have strong personalities. Arthur, please don't make it a thing. We're going to be married soon. It will all settle down. It never settled down. It escalated. This Christmas was supposed to be perfect. I had worked 60-hour weeks, taking every overtime shift at the shop, coming home with my hands cracked and bleeding from the cold metal, just to save up the $14,200 for this massive luxury lodge in Vermont. I paid for it entirely. I thought I was buying my kids a magical memory. Instead, I bought my own exclusion. They wanted the luxury of my money without the burden of my presence. They viewed my kids as annoying baggage and me as an embarrassment. So, they hatched a plan to steal my kids, leave me sleeping, and enjoy a $14,200 vacation on my dime. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the wood grain, listening to my phone violently vibrate across the surface. At call number 115, I finally swiped to answer. It was Helen. Arthur. She shrieked. Her voice was so loud and shrill it could have shattered glass. What the hell did you do? I held the phone an inch away from my ear, keeping my voice completely deadpan and monotone. What I did, Helen, was cancel a reservation that I paid for. I heard a sharp, panicked intake of breath. You can't do that. The front desk is turning us away. They said the booking is voided. I already did it, I replied coldly. You ruined Christmas. She screamed, her voice cracking into absolute rage. You ruined my family, I shot back, the anger finally bleeding into my words. Helen went dead quiet. Not out of remorse, but because she was frantically searching for a new angle of manipulation. She immediately pivoted to guilt. The children are devastated, Arthur, she said, her voice suddenly trembling with fake tears. They are freezing in the lobby. They don't understand why their father would do something so cruel. My children? I asked. Yes. Your children. Put them on the phone, I demanded. No, not until you fix this. You need to call the hotel right now and rebook the rooms. Give them your card number again. We are stuck. Stuck where? There are no other rooms available. The backup hotels are completely booked for the holiday. We have 17 people standing in a parking lot. I pictured it. 4 cars. 17 arrogant, entitled people standing in the freezing Vermont snow with their designer luggage, their matching Christmas sweaters suddenly looking utterly pathetic. I didn't feel an ounce of pity. I felt absolute clarity. I'm not paying for anything, I said slowly, enunciating every syllable, and I am not doing a damn thing until you tell me exactly why my fiancé kidnapped my children while I was asleep. Don't be so dramatic, Helen snapped, dropping the fake crying instantly. Nobody kidnapped anyone, we just wanted a stress-free morning. Maya sent me a screenshot. Helen, I interrupted. I know about the group chat. I know about the plan. I know you specifically schemed to leave me behind. Total silence on the other end of the line. Then, I heard Maya's voice faintly in the background shouting, who told him? How does he know? I hung up. 5 minutes later, Chloe called. I answered. Arthur, she whispered, her voice cracking, sounding tiny and terrified. Please just listen to me. I'm listening, I said. My voice was eerily calm. We didn't mean it the way it looked. She stammered, crying hard now. Maya was just making a stupid joke. My mom just thought it would be easier if you stayed home and rested. You work so hard. We thought you'd enjoy a quiet weekend alone. You stole my children, Chloe. They're safe, they're with me. They are with a woman who lied to my face and a family who views me as a bank account. I said, my throat tightening. I loved you, Chloe. I really did, but you put my kids in a car with people who despise their father. You made me wake up to an empty house, thinking my family was gone. Arthur, please, she sobbed. It's freezing outside. The kids are cold. We need somewhere to go. Please just call the hotel. I'm calling the police, I said. What? You took my children across state lines without my consent while I was asleep. That is kidnapping. You have exactly 60 seconds to text me your exact GPS coordinates, or I am calling the state troopers and reporting a parental abduction. Arthur, you can't do this to us. 55 seconds, I said. She texted me the address of a rundown highway rest stop about 2 hours north of my house. They had been kicked off the luxury resort property and were huddled at a gas station. I didn't tell her I was coming. I simply grabbed my keys, got into my heavy-duty diesel truck, and started driving. Update 1. People often think that revenge is supposed to be loud. They think it involves screaming matches, thrown plates, and dramatic, movie-style speeches. But true revenge is incredibly quiet. It is methodical, it is paperwork and boundaries. While I drove, I called my cousin who works in family law. I explained the situation. Because Chloe and I were not legally married, and she had zero legal guardianship over Leo and Mia, her taking them out of the house without my knowledge was a massive legal liability. My cousin advised me to call the non-emergency police line in the jurisdiction where they were parked and request a civil standby for a child retrieval. I did exactly that. I explained to the dispatcher that my ex-fiancé had taken my minor children without my consent and I was en route to collect them, but I anticipated a hostile environment from her family. They agreed to send a cruiser to meet me at the rest stop. I pulled into the snowy parking lot 2 hours later. My massive black truck idled with a low, intimidating hum. I saw them immediately. 4 cars parked haphazardly. 17 people huddled inside the small, dingy convenience store of the rest stop, looking miserable. Helen was pacing furiously, yelling into her cell phone. Maya was sitting on a plastic chair, crying and ruining her makeup. And there was Chloe, sitting in a booth, holding Leo and Mia close to her. I parked next to the state trooper's cruiser that had just arrived. I stepped out of the truck, the freezing wind whipping my jacket, and walked inside with the officer right behind me. The moment Helen saw me, her face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. She marched toward me, pointing a manicured finger at my chest. You vindictive, selfish piece of trash, she screamed, not caring that half the gas station was staring at us. You embarrassed us, you left us stranded in the cold. I didn't even look at her. I walked right past her, keeping my eyes locked on my children. Leo saw me first. His eyes widened, and he jumped up from the booth. "Dad," he yelled, running toward me. I dropped to my knees and caught him, burying my face in his shoulder. Mia followed a second later, wrapping her little arms around my neck, crying softly. "Are you guys okay?" I whispered into their hair. "We wanted to go home," Mia sniffled. Helen was yelling a lot. "I know, baby. We're going home right now." I stood up, holding Mia in my arms and gripping Leo's hand. Chloe stood up from the booth. She looked completely broken. Her eyes were swollen red, her hair was a mess, and she looked like a woman who had just realized she had driven her entire life off a cliff. "Arthur," she pleaded, reaching a hand out toward me. "Please, let's just talk. We can fix this. I'll pay you back for the hotel. We can still have a good Christmas." I looked at her. I looked at the woman I had planned to marry, the woman I had worked my fingers to the bone for. "A misunderstanding is forgetting to pick up the dry cleaning, Chloe," I said, my voice eerily calm and carrying through the quiet store. "You conspired to abandon me. You packed my kids into a car in the dead of night. You let your family treat me like a parasite." Maya scoffed from the corner, crossing her arms. "Oh my God, you are such a drama king. We just wanted one nice vacation without you dragging the mood down with your blue-collar depression." I turned to Maya, pulled my phone from my pocket, and held up the screen. The screenshot was glowing brightly. "Our plan worked. The mechanic is staying home." I read it out loud for the entire gas station, and the police officer, to hear. Maya's face drained of all color. Helen's mouth opened and closed like a suffocating fish. I turned back to Chloe. Tears were streaming down her face. "You were supposed to be my partner," I said quietly, "but you chose them. So you can stay with them." I turned around and walked out the door. The police officer stood in the doorway, ensuring Helen didn't try to follow me or grab the kids. I buckled Leo and Mia into the warm cab of my truck, shut the doors, and drove away. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror once. Update 2. You would think that would be the end of it. You would think that being stranded at a gas station, with no hotel and a cancelled $14,200 booking would be rock bottom. But you underestimate the sheer, delusional audacity of toxic people who refuse to look poor on the internet. The first week back home was a strange adjustment. I threw away everything that belonged to Chloe. I boxed up her clothes, her makeup, her stupid decorative pillows, and left them on the porch for her to collect. My house was finally quiet, but this time, it was a peaceful quiet. I made pancakes for the kids, we watched movies. We decorated a new, smaller Christmas tree, just the three of us. But behind the scenes, Helen was orchestrating her own spectacular downfall. 3 days after the gas station incident, my phone pinged with an automated fraud alert from American Express. "Suspicious charge detected. $9,500 at the Grand Summit Winter Resort. Reply yes to authorize or no to decline." I stared at the screen. Helen. When I had paid for her car insurance 6 months prior, she had conveniently saved my credit card information on her Apple Pay and laptop. Refusing to admit defeat to her extended family, and desperate to post her aesthetic vacation photos on Facebook, Helen had used my stolen credit card information to book 3 luxury suites at a completely different resort just down the highway from where they were stranded. She thought I wouldn't notice. She thought I would just pay the bill to avoid the conflict, like I always did. She was wrong. I immediately replied times no. Then, I called American Express, reported the card stolen, and flagged the transaction as felony fraud. The fraud department asked if I knew who made the charge. I gave them Helen's exact name, her address, and the name of the hotel she had just fraudulently booked. Because the charge was nearly $10,000, it crossed the threshold into grand larceny and felony wire fraud. The credit card company did not take it lightly, and neither did the local authorities. I found out what happened next through a frantic, hysterical voicemail left by Maya 2 days later. Helen had marched into the lobby of the Grand Summit Winter Resort with her entire 17-person entourage. She was wearing her matching silk Christmas pajamas, demanding her room keys, and sipping a complimentary glass of champagne. She was at the front desk arguing with the concierge about getting a free room upgrade when 2 local police officers walked through the sliding glass doors. They asked for her by name. When she proudly identified herself, they asked her to confirm the credit card she used for the booking. She confidently produced her phone. The officers immediately informed her that the card was reported stolen and the charges were flagged as felony fraud. Helen tried to scream. She tried to pull the "do you know who I am" card. She tried to claim I was her son-in-law and it was a simple misunderstanding. But the hotel manager pressed charges for the attempted theft of services, and American Express was already pursuing the fraud claim. They placed Helen in handcuffs right there in the lobby. In front of the giant gingerbread house, in front of her entire horrified family, in front of Maya, who was too busy crying to film it for her Instagram, they walked her out to the cruiser in her silk pajamas. The rest of the family, having absolutely no money of their own to pay for a hotel or even gas to get home, Ended up sleeping in their cars in a Walmart parking lot before slowly driving the 4 hours back home in absolute, humiliating defeat. Chloe came to my house one final time a week later to collect her boxes. She looked hollowed out. The vibrant, smiling woman I had met at the mechanic shop was gone, replaced by a ghost weighed down by the consequences of her own spinelessness. She stood on my porch, shivering in the cold. "My mom is facing felony charges, Arthur," she whispered, her voice trembling. She had to take out a second mortgage to pay for the lawyer. Maya is refusing to speak to her. The whole family is completely fractured. "Actions have consequences, Chloe," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "I fix engines for a living. When you ignore the check engine light and keep driving, the engine eventually explodes. Your mother drove the car off a cliff, and you sat in the passenger's seat and let her. I'm so sorry," she choked out, tears spilling over her cheeks. "I lost everything. I lost you. I lost the kids. I'll do anything to fix this. Therapy, boundaries, I'll cut them off. Please." I looked past her, into my warm living room. Leo and Mia were sitting on the rug, building a massive Lego castle together. They were laughing. They were safe. "You can't fix a totaled car, Chloe," I said softly. "You just have to send it to the scrapyard and buy a new one." I closed the door, locked the deadbolt, and walked back to my children. It has been a month since then. We celebrated New Year's Eve just the three of us. I packed a thermos of hot cocoa, loaded the kids into the back of my truck, and we drove up to a small hill outside of town where you can see the entire city skyline lit up against the night sky. We sat wrapped in heavy blankets, watching the distant fireworks pop in the cold air. Leo leaned his head against my shoulder. "Dad?" he asked quietly. "Are we still a real family? Even without Chloe?" The question hit me right in the chest. I wrapped my arms around him and pulled Mia close to my side. "Yes, buddy," I said firmly, kissing the top of his head. "We are the realest family there is. Because family isn't about who buys the most expensive vacations, and it's not about letting people treat you badly just to keep the peace. Family is about who stays. And I am never, ever going to leave you." Mia smiled, sipping her hot cocoa, and pointed at a bright green firework exploding over the city. I finally felt something settle deep inside my chest. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't betrayal. It was just pure, unadulterated peace. I wasn't their ATM anymore. I wasn't their backup plan. I was just Arthur. A mechanic, a father, and a man who finally learned that love without respect is just another form of debt, and I was officially declaring bankruptcy. Top comments. User 1. As a fellow mechanic, I felt this in my soul. People who don't work with their hands always look down on us until their car breaks down or they need someone to foot the bill. The fact that they called you the mechanic in that text shows exactly how they viewed you, not as a person, but as a utility. Good on you for canceling that $14,000 booking. Let them freeze. User 2. The absolute audacity of Helen to steal your credit card information and try to book a $9,500 hotel after she just kidnapped your kids. Getting arrested in her silk Christmas pajamas in a luxury lobby is poetic justice at its finest. Chloe enabled this behavior for years. She didn't lose everything because of a mistake. She lost it because she chose her toxic mother over a good man. User 3. Filing the police report for the credit card fraud was the smartest thing you could have done. If you had let that slide, she would have kept doing it forever. Also, taking your kids out of the house while you were asleep is terrifying. Chloe showed you exactly who she was when she prioritized her mother's aesthetic vacation over your children's safety. You saved yourself and your kids from a lifetime of misery.